Let's talk about something that affects each and every one of us, the national debt in the United States. Right now, it stands at a whopping $34 trillion. Now, that might sound like a big, confusing number, but stick with me, and we'll break it down. To understand the severity of this problem, let's take a brief look at history. Debt has been a companion of the United States since its inception, a constant presence that many have come to see as familiar and perhaps harmless. However, the key takeaway is that debt has always been woven into our country's narrative. Now, you might wonder, why worry now? If debt is so woven into the fabric of our economy, haven't we dealt with this challenge throughout our history? While it's true that we've faced debt before and found a way forward, we need to consider the concept of debt spirals. These spirals have historically played a role in the downfall of some of the world's most significant empires. And right now, we seem to be heading in that exact direction. It may sound far-fetched, but the signs are definitely there. Now, what is the debt spiral? Basically, as our debt grows exponentially, we'll eventually reach a point where servicing that debt becomes too burdensome. Put simply, borrowing money is easy when rates are favorable, but as interest rates rise, the burden becomes increasingly difficult to manage. The United States currently spends $169 billion per year on interest expenses alone, accounting for around 16% of our annual budget. In 4 years, it's estimated that the government will spend twice as much on interest as it does on our entire military. This path is clearly unsustainable and poses a serious risk to our entire financial system. To understand the specifics and just how dire the situation is, we need to heed Dalio's warnings. He makes it abundantly clear how close we are to this dangerous scenario. According to Ray Dalio, we might just be at the beginning of a very classic late-cycle debt crisis. But what does that mean? Let's break it down. In simple terms, a debt crisis happens when there's too much debt floating around and not enough people willing to buy it. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a lot of stuff to sell, but there aren't enough people interested in buying it. That's the situation we're facing with government debt. Dalio explains that we're producing too much debt, and there's a shortage of buyers. This creates a problem. When there's a lot of debt that needs to be sold, but not enough buyers, it becomes harder to sell that debt at a good price. And right now, there are changes happening in the world that are making it even more difficult. Some big investors who used to buy a lot of government debt are losing interest. They're looking for other investments that might give them better returns. Plus, there are geopolitical changes happening, like countries worrying about sanctions or shifting alliances. All these factors affect the demand for government debt. So, when Dalio talks about a debt crisis, he's saying that if we keep going down this path for the next 5 or 10 years, it's going to become very hard to balance things out. We'll struggle to find enough buyers for all the debt we're producing, and that's when things can get really tough. Now, you might be wondering, how will we know if we're really in a debt crisis? Is it just about not having enough buyers for government debt? When asked the same question, Dalio says we're right on the brink of finding out. Dalio suggests that there might be a significant shortage of buyers for government debt, and over the next year or two, we'll start to see how this plays out. If there aren't enough buyers, it could be a sign that we're heading deeper into a debt crisis. Let's break down what we mean when we say the government selling its debt. When the government needs money for things like building roads, funding schools, or running public programs, it doesn't always have enough cash on hand. So it turns to the financial markets to borrow money. How does it do this? It sells something called government debt, which comes in the form of treasury securities. These treasury securities are basically promises from the government to pay back a certain amount of money with some extra interest over a set period of time. There are different types like treasury bills, notes, and bonds, each with their own repayment timelines. Who buys these treasury securities? Well, it could be anyone from regular folks like you and me to big financial companies and even other countries. When they buy these securities, they're lending money to the government, and in return, they get paid back with interest. This is how the government gets the money it needs to do all the things it does without relying solely on taxes. But here's the thing Dalio is talking about. There's not as much demand for U.S. debt as there used to be. It means fewer people and investors are willing to lend money to the U.S. government. So why is it a big deal if fewer people want to lend money to the government? Well, it can lead to a few problems. First, if there's less demand for U.S. debt, the government might have to offer higher interest rates to convince people to lend them money. You can think of it like trying to sell something that nobody wants. You might have to make it more appealing by lowering the price or offering extra perks. Secondly, if demand for U.S. debt keeps dropping, it might become harder for the government to get the money it needs. Imagine if you needed a loan, but fewer and fewer banks were willing to lend to you. It could make things pretty tough financially. As the federal government's deficit, that's the gap between what it spends and what it collects in taxes, grows bigger, it has to borrow more money by selling these debt instruments to make up the difference. However, Dalio's observation reveals a concerning trend. When fewer people want to buy them, it triggers a critical consequence. The interest rates on these securities have to go up. And considering that we're already spending a lot of money just to cover interest expenses, any further increase in interest rates could be really bad for our economy. Raising interest rates on government securities tends to affect interest rates across the board. And if it goes too far, it can slow down economic growth and even lead to a recession. So finding the right balance is super important to prevent any big problems in the broader economy. Dalio brings up an important point about internal conflict and how it relates to our financial challenges. When we have financial problems, along with big gaps between rich and poor, something interesting tends to happen in politics. We start seeing the rise of populism. Populism is when leaders or politicians focus on winning at any cost, even if it means breaking the rules. And this leads to extremism in both political parties. You might have heard about events like the one on January 6th. These incidents show just how divided our political system has become. With extreme views on both sides, it's hard to find common ground. And this polarization is fueled by our political system, which tends to favor more extreme candidates during primary elections. Dalio believes that the only good outcome is if we can find a strong middle ground. Extremes on either side won't work. If one extreme gains too much power, it could lead to even more division and conflict. We're already seeing people moving to different areas, not just because of taxes, but because of differences in values. Over the next 2 years, the big question is whether we can keep that strong middle ground or if we'll continue to fragment into extremes. And this internal conflict comes at a time when we're also dealing with financial issues. Dalio calls this a short-term debt cycle, and we're about halfway through it. This means that interest rates are at a level where they're probably going to stay up, but they're not likely to go much higher. And this could have consequences for our economy. When interest rates are high, it can make it harder for people and businesses to borrow money, which can slow down economic growth. We might not see a big downturn, but it could still mean tough times ahead for the economy. And all of this is happening at the same time as our internal conflicts. So Dalio thinks that we're heading into a risky situation where both our finances and our politics could cause problems. In essence, what Dalio is saying is that we're at a critical point where our financial challenges and internal conflicts are coming together to create a potentially dangerous situation. It's a reminder that we need to find ways to work together and find common ground to navigate these challenges successfully. Now, as scary as all that sounded, it's not all doom and gloom. Despite growing concerns about the U.S. national debt, history gives us a reassuring perspective. Look back at the aftermath of the Civil War, and you'll find that at that time, the national debt shot up by a massive 40 times. The United States faced huge challenges, and its global influence wasn't as strong as it is today. But despite all of that, the U.S. managed to get through it. How did we do it? Well, things like selling bonds, being careful with money, and focusing on growing the economy all played big roles. Fast forward to today, and even though our national debt is growing fast, we're in a much better position to handle it. The U.S. has a stronger global presence and a diverse economy. So even if the debt were to shoot up dramatically, history tells us that careful financial management can help prevent things like hyperinflation. Plus, as the global reserve currency and a military superpower, the U.S. has some unique advantages. For example, it can export inflation, which means it can increase the amount of money in circulation without causing a big drop in the value of the dollar. This is because the U.S. dollar is in high demand all around the world. According to a survey, the U.S. dollar is involved in about 88% of global foreign exchange transactions. This shows just how important the dollar is on the world stage, and this gives the U.S. some flexibility when it comes to managing its budget deficit, even in tough times. Now, while some people might think that Dalio's warnings are a bit over the top, there are others who believe that a major economic fallout might be what's needed to change things. After all, new rules are often made after big disasters, so it might take a major crisis to get lawmakers to change the way things are going. The effects of this financial crisis are already visible, with many businesses like fast food restaurants suffering heavy losses and closing shops. Click the video on screen now to learn more about the 15 fast food chains that have been hit the worst during this financial crisis.